So the Lakers have been extremely busy so far throughout this offseason. For one, they hired JJ Redick as their new head coach. And they got busy at the draft by picking Dalton Knecht from Tennessee at the 17th pick. Very good pick for this team, an amazing shooter. And also at 55 in the second round, they picked Bronny James, creating the first father-son duo in NBA history. Obviously, they're going to make a lot of other moves this offseason to try to inch closer towards title contention. And what I'm going to do on this video is react to a Bleacher Report article where they list off some of the biggest needs for the Lakers and also what three players could help them address some of those needs in this offseason. So first thing here is this. I think the biggest need, in my opinion, for this Lakers team is having good two-way players. I think that is the most important thing outright. They struggled out there on the perimeter, especially from a defensive standpoint. One of the reasons is they did not have the personnel to guard out there on the perimeter. For one, if you have a backcourt of Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell, you're going to struggle a bit defensively. Also, Rui Hachimura did not do a good job with guarding Michael Porter Jr. and allowed him to get really efficient, easy looks off, right? So just improving that perimeter defense, I think that is their biggest need in this offseason, and finding guys who can do that is going to help them a ton and take them to the next level when you're talking about trying to beat teams like Denver or obviously Dallas, who was the Western Conference champion last season. So let's get right into it. Let's list off these names. And the first name they list off is Jerami Grant. So Jerami Grant, a wing, has averaged 20 points per game over the past 4 seasons with really efficient shooting splits. Generally throughout his career, he has been a really efficient guy, both from general field goal percentage and also from the three-point line. A really good defensive player, a guy who actually can guard multiple positions. One thing Bleacher Report mentions here in the article is how he can guard all 5 positions. Last season, he spent 6% of his minutes at center, which is the most of his career. So he can guard multiple spots, one of the most versatile defenders in the entire league. And one of the things I mentioned was Rui Hachimura and how he struggled guarding off the ball, guarding wings, guarding guys like Michael Porter Jr. He was kind of chasing him around on the perimeter, couldn't keep up, and gave up a lot of easy baskets. With Jerami Grant, you're not going to have that problem. Jerami Grant is much more athletic, a little more slender than Rui Hachimura, so we'll be able to do a lot better in that particular role, right? Better screen navigation when it comes to getting through screens and everything, both on the ball and off the ball. I think he's better at what they wanted Rui Hachimura to do defensively during the playoffs last season. Also, he can scale down his role. So if you look at his numbers, I mentioned he's like a 20-point per game scorer over the last couple of seasons, but he can play a complementary role. They saw him do that back in the 2020 season when he played for Denver. Was really efficient there as they made a Western Conference Finals appearance. So he's not one of those guys who we've seen over the course of his career put up good numbers on a bad team, and once they get on a really good team, that's when they kind of struggle. No, Jerami Grant has shown the ability to be a complementary piece, to kind of take a step down and be a great role player, right? And I think that's exactly what the Lakers need. Also, he's very athletic. LeBron loves playing with athletic players who can kind of run out on the break. He can kind of hit him on those outlet passes. Jerami Grant fits that role perfectly. I think Jerami Grant is awesome. Obviously, they'd have to acquire him in a trade. I don't know what that looks like right now, but if we're talking about moving pieces to get a guy, he's an ideal piece to definitely look at, who also kind of helps with how JJ Redick wants to run this Lakers offense. One thing he mentioned was having LeBron off the ball a lot more, and Jerami Grant can create for himself. I don't think he can do it on a super high volume on a really good team, but he can do it just enough, right, to take some pressure off of guys like AR and LeBron. So I like him a lot. I think he's a great target. He fits what they primarily need. So I like Jerami Grant to the Lakers a lot. Again, I don't know what pieces they'd be giving up to get him, but he is definitely somebody who would be a viable option for this team. Next name they list off is Trae Young. All right, so obviously Trae Young is one of the best offensive players in the NBA. This will be a major blockbuster move. It pairs Trae with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. We could expect that Lakers offense to look a lot different having Trae Young there. And obviously that was going to happen either way because JJ Redick is their new coach. He's going to run a completely different system than Darvin Ham. One thing I mentioned earlier was that Redick said that he wants to have LeBron play off the ball a lot more. Trae fits right into that plan. Trae Young is one of the best on-ball guys in the entire league. Lakers last season were also top 10 in pick and roll frequency. That number is going to increase when Trae Young gets there. So, or if he gets there. So like I said, expect a change in how the offense looks. I'm not worried about his offensive stuff on this team. I think they're going to be just fine in that regard. But I mentioned it earlier. I'm worried about the defense. whatever deal they make, they have to make sure they're bringing back some defense. They don't get anywhere if they're not able to guard. Because like I said, you're dealing with teams like Dallas or Denver, who are just so good from a perimeter standpoint. Dallas spent the entire postseason hunting mismatches. So a backcourt of Austin Reeves and Trae Young is not a good defensive backcourt at all. Yes, the offensive upside is high, but in the playoffs where things slow down, we saw it this season, you've got to be able to go out there and guard. One perimeter liability on the defensive end can totally dismantle your team and puts you at a major disadvantage. So maybe Trae takes a leap defensively, becomes a better team defender. But like I said, I'm just not confident that he helps this team from a perimeter defensive standpoint in a large volume to get them over the hump. Again, the offensive stuff looks great, but do not underrate the value of defense in the playoffs. Dallas lost to Boston primarily because Luka was such a liability on the defensive end. You cannot have that at all. Cannot. You could be the most talented guy offensively, but the inability to defend, being kind of a cone out there, lowers your value. We saw that with Luka. Before this series, we were ready to say Luka was the best player in the league, and we saw how much of a liability he was defensively and how that dismantled the Mavericks, and there were a bunch of other reasons why they lost. But still, we saw what that did with Luka. That same thing could end up happening to Trae. I don't think he kind of, helps them with their biggest need. Again, he looks good for their offense, but defensively, they don't grow at all, especially when it comes to trying to beat some of those elite offenses in the West. So it looks good, but it doesn't address their biggest needs. So I think we should pass on the Trae Young thing. Again, a trio of LeBron, AD, and Trae Young looks great, but we've seen some team implosions happen. We've seen some really good trios implode this past season. Case in point, the Phoenix Suns with Durant, Booker, and Beal. Not saying that's going to happen here with this trio if this ends up being a thing, but because there still isn't much defensively there on the perimeter, even with having those three guys, I'm going to say a no on that one. That may seem controversial, but I really do think from a perimeter standpoint, getting better defensively should be their biggest focus this offseason. Final name they list off is Klay Thompson. So still a really high frequency catch and shoot guy. He had the second most catch and shoot threes made last season. I know we talk about Klay as if he fell off, but he was still an above average 3-point shooter. Just kind of know that even when he's in a slump, he's still an elite level shooter. It's amazing. But biggest thing is if you're going to make a big move, your question is, does it totally solve, or does it at least do its job to solve some of your biggest issues? So how much does Klay Thompson solve your defensive issues? Well, he does it a lot more than Trae, right? Klay is a much better defensive player than Trae Young, but he's not the defender that he used to be. I would love to see if we can see him get back on that elite defensive level he was at back in 2016 or 2017. That's kind of a long time ago. He's better than Trae, but he's still not elite level from a defensive standpoint. And I just don't know, again, if he totally addresses their defensive struggles out there, right? He may just a little bit, but to a monumental degree, I don't know. I feel like there are other guys you can target. And so we look at some of these moves and these, with the Trae Young move or the Klay Thompson move, they're big name players, right? And that's cool, but does it address your biggest need? So the Suns, you go out and get Bradley Beal to go alongside with KD and Devin Booker. And I'm going to keep using that as an example. Yes, it's good that you brought in another dynamic scorer, but does that address your actual needs? The Celtics had to get there at some point, right? They have a lot of great offensive talent between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and they brought in some good guys around them. But your question was, do those guys around JT and Jaylen Brown, do they address the specific needs? If your specific needs aren't addressed, no matter how much talent you have, you're not going to be able to get over the hump, right? Same situation here for this Lakers squad. So Boston had to get a guy like Derek White who can kind of organize the offense a bit, and that's why they're at an entirely different level this season than what they were in years prior, right? Drew Holiday also kind of tempers their offense a bit. Same thing with the Lakers. Getting an all-star guy, just another dude who's a 20-point per game scorer, is cool, but does that address your biggest need? Because if it doesn't, you still have this major hole in your game plan, and if you're not able to address it, you're just going to end up in these same positions. And right now, more than ever, guarding on the perimeter is super important. As I said it, I'm going to say it again. Denver, even Minnesota, and also Dallas, they're going to take advantage of liabilities out there on the perimeter from a defensive standpoint. Klay has been a solid defender. He isn't the defender he used to be. So how much does he truly address those perimeter defensive issues? From a shooting standpoint, they'll be just fine. They'll have him. They'll have Dalton Knecht. Austin Reeves is a good enough shooter, and guys like that. D'Lo, if they bring him back, is a good enough shooter, but he does not address their defensive problems at all. right? He made to a little bit of a degree, but not to a monumental degree. So I'm going to say a no on that one as well. So like I said, it may seem controversial that I'm shooting down the Klay Thompson and Trae Young thing, but I really think just having big time two-way threats is the biggest need. They don't need an all-star caliber player. They just need guys who can fit within those types of roles and fit within those niches perfectly. And I don't know if Trae and Klay really bring that to the table. We've seen superstar, all-star pairings and trios. We've seen them be disappointments because they don't specifically address those types of needs. So I think the best move here would be bringing in a guy like Jerami Grant. The only downside to bringing him in would be his health. I mentioned it before, hasn't played over 65 games since 2020, but I like him a lot from a two-way standpoint, and he gives you just enough experience as a shot creator to take pressure off of AR and LeBron at some points in time. So let me know what y'all think, and also shoot off some other good ideas as far as players go that the Lakers should target this offseason. But we'll see what they end up doing. Free agency starts on Sunday. It's going to be a very interesting next couple of months for the Lakers as they look to get back to NBA championship contention status.